This is the RPG Crawler, and welcome once again to RPG Storytime, where I take a look back and tell you one of the many tales from one of the many years of gaming that I've done. Now, this particular incident is not going to be a tale about my players, although the majority of them are, simply because I do end up DMing a lot of games rather than playing them. This is actually going to be a tale about one of my characters, and really why you should get together with your party just to plan things before a campaign starts. In this instance, we kind of did that, but I was not really aware of the depths to which certain abilities would interact. Now, this was a 3.5 campaign. This was back a while back. This is a while back. And I wanted to play something I really don't play much. I was warned before this game began that it would be heavy on the social type interactions, although what combats there were would be pretty violent and pretty difficult. So I came up with a healer because basically, a lot of times when I am the player, I can play pretty much anything, and I enjoy playing a wide variety of different character types. In this instance, everybody else's characters had already been picked. They had an opening for a healer. So I picked, actually, the healer class. And it's a class from, I think, Miniatures Handbook, basically a battlefield healer that specializes purely in healing magic. So it's not even a cleric. You don't even get half the things that a cleric does. Now, the DM was kind enough, and this is an interesting one, because I was really into finding a way to make it a unique-seeming healer. There are a series of feats in 3.5 that come from the Book of Exalted Deeds. And yeah, I know a couple of you out there, in fact, a lot of you out there are probably seeing where this is going. And they are called basically vows or whatever. Now, one of the feats is called the Vow of Poverty. Yes, it's a very broken feat. It basically restricts you to having almost nothing. You can have like a walking stick, like bread and water for one day, some rags, and maybe like bits of string or whatever, just nothing with any material value. And one of the ways it is broken is that a lot of monks choose it, because when you take Vow of Poverty, you can't get treasure, you can't get material goods, but it immediately grants you bonuses to your AC and to various saves over time. I would have to actually take it out. In fact, I think I've got the Book of Exalted Deeds. Right here. I mean, I had the book, but I mean, have it ready. Book of Exalted Deeds, back from 3.5 edition. I should have pulled this out before I started this thing. Really, I should have. Let me go ahead and read to you. If you take... Okay, in order to take the Vow of Poverty, you have to take a feat called Sacred Vow, which means that you don't necessarily get the ability to take Vow of Poverty at first level unless you're a human. Humans do get their extra feat at first level, so if you're a human, you can take Vow of Poverty at first level. So that's what I did. I took Sacred Vow as my first feat, and then Vow of Poverty as my second feat. And I'm looking for where it specifically states it, because oddly enough, it's not listed under the feat itself. Like, Vow of Poverty's abilities are not actually listed under the feat Vow of Poverty. They're listed in a table elsewhere in the book. And I think I can look that up real quick. We'll go with... voluntary poverty. All right, when you take the Vow of Poverty, and you can do this at first level, if you're a human, you take the take the Sacred Vow feat, then take Vow of Poverty. It immediately, at first level, interestingly enough, the Vow of Poverty abilities that it gives you are not, they do not scale up to your level. You only get them for levels that you actually had Vow of Poverty on. So if you had Vow of Poverty at a certain level, then you get that bonus. It's weird. I think it's the only feat that works like that. And I could be wrong about how it works, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. So at first level, you get an immediate AC bonus of +4, and I think it's split across different types. Yeah, you get, and it's differentiated a bit. So at first level, you get a +4 Exalted bonus to your armor class. Okay, so Exalted bonus basically stacks with everything else. Then at second level, you get a bonus Exalted feat, which is a very specific type of sub-feat in this book. You have to be very, very good to maintain them. Then you get additional AC bonus at third level, plus like an effect of Endure Elements, basically that you can sustain yourself in extreme hot and cold if you don't have the gear, because you're not going to have the gear because you've sworn off mortal goods. So you're going to be walking around in blizzards barefoot with just a threadbare robe. You eventually get to be able to hit things with your fists as if they were magic weapons, and this kind of sort of overlaps. This overlaps the monk ability, but I think it comes in earlier. And I think it works for any weapon. So if you've got like a walking stick, all of a sudden it becomes a +1 weapon. You eventually get more Exalted feats bonus. You get resistances. You get the ability to live without food and water. You get ability score enhancements because you're not going to get magic items. It just gives you innate ability score enhancements and so on and so forth. And it just ups it pretty much what you would expect a character to have, because and this would merit an entire video of its own. 3.5 and 3.x, in fact, starting at 3rd edition, they all kind of depended on certain characters having certain magic items at certain levels. So Vow of Poverty pretty much automatically gives you a very generalized thing. Now for monks, since all of this stacks with monk stuff, that means that a monk can take Vow of Poverty and just go through the roof for combat abilities. I was not a monk. I was a healer. In fact, if I ever got into a fight, it was going to be an issue, because you get these bonus Exalted feats. So what I did was I asked the DM, and I said, look, Vow of Poverty doesn't allow you to have anything of material value. But, and I was going to argue this, the healer class, a lot of their stuff requires Holy Symbol. Now, Holy Symbol does not necessarily have to have a material value if the god's in question Holy Symbol can be represented by something with no material value. And in this case, I chose to be a healer of of the Broken God, the Forgotten Realms, the guy that Ilmater, that one. He's basically a fantasy version of Jesus Christ. A lot of the Forgotten Realms gods are based on real world gods, if not direct ripoffs of real world gods. Ilmater isn't exactly like an XP of Christ, but he's got that whole suffered for redemption, that kind of thing going on, and they kind of play him up like that. So one of his holy symbols is basically a red string to represent the lash wounds. And I was very grateful for the DM to say, okay, since a red string really wouldn't have a value, and it says you can have like clothes and stuff, then you can go ahead and take a red string as your holy symbol. So, okay, thank you. So I was a healer, I could cast spells, and then I took Vow of Poverty. So I'm playing this very good, very compassionate healer type that was all for, taking on others' suffering. And then my build was to basically take, instead of focusing on like combat, I did take a few things to boost her healing, because healing is just great. But you can actually get a higher end. If you were going to min-max it, you really want to take a cleric, because clerics can min-max healing better than a healer can. And in fact, I think there's some PRC classes from 3.5 that can just give you more absolute healing. I was not going that route. I did take a little bit to boost healing, but not just to purely min-max it. Instead, a lot of the feats I took were other vow feats. So under the other feats that required Sacred Vow. So Sacred Vow gives you bonuses to diplomacy. Vow of Poverty gives you bonuses to AC, ability scores, etc., etc. So what I did then was I was like, well, what fits for an ascetic healer? Basically, what you'd expect of somebody wandering around, spreading the word of Elmater and healing things and being real kind and taking on others' suffering and such, as somebody who believes in Ilmater may. And so I picked Vow of Nonviolence and Vow of Peace. Now, what does that do? That makes it so you can attack, but you really can't harm living things. So I think Vow of Nonviolence means that you can't harm like humans, or Vow of Peace means you can't harm humans, and then Vow of Nonviolence extends that. So pretty much, unless it's a construct or an undead, you really can't attack anything without basically breaking your vow. But what that does is that gives you a couple really neat supernatural things. It not only boosts your saves and your AC even more. In fact, yeah. What it does is it gives you an aura that calms everybody around you, and it functions like a calm emotion spell. And that takes a little bit of DM interpretation, because some things are going to attack you regardless. But if you walk in and there's like an animal that's agitated and it's coming at you because it's angry or agitated, that calm emotion should technically make it stop and act in a neutral manner. Furthermore, it does have a game effect in that it basically flat out negates things that require emotions to have an effect. So morale effects, that kind of thing. And then it also gives you, I'm not sure which of the vows does, I would have to look it up, and I'm not looking at that part of the book yet. But it also gives you kind of like an issue with if somebody attacks you with a weapon and they hit you, then their weapon has to save or it just breaks. It does no damage and it just shatters. And then I believe there's something like a sanctuary effect. I could be wrong. I'm going to look. In fact, I am going to go ahead and look at it, because even though I said I wasn't going to look at it, I will take a look at it real quick, because I seem to recall her also having almost like a sanctuary type effect where they had to save if they even wanted to attack. So I'm gonna eyeball that real quick. Vow of Peace. You get AC bonus. You get it stacks with the Vow of Poverty feat. So if you have Vow of Poverty and Vow of Peace, they just stack further. You get creatures that makes a successful saving throw and remains in the order is unaffected. That's the Calm Emotions one. And then Vow of Nonviolence. A Vow of Nonviolence gives you bonuses versus certain spells, and in fact it makes your effects harder for people to resist, which is interesting. Because what happens is then if you do have something that protects you, like if you do have the Sanctuary spell up, Sanctuary in 3rd edition basically makes people make a save in order to attack you. And Vow of Nonviolence would boost the difficulty of that save. So you can actually make it a very high bar for people who are even thinking about attacking you. Let's see. You actually give people penalties if they slay helpless foes within like 120 feet of you or whatever, including your allies. So this is one of those. A lot of people, I've done discussions, and people with better videos than I have done discussions on the murder hobo that walks around killing prisoners and such. In 3.5, if you want to be that guy, and you take vow of nonviolence, you can penalize your party passively for murdering prisoners or for surrendering people. Basically there's that. So that's interesting there. That basically made this character into this not only pacifist, but into this pacifist with an aura that made it so others kind of should have been pacifists as well, or wanted to be pacifists. And it was neat because at the beginning of the game, it worked out very well. But a problem soon became evident. And that problem was the calm emotions effect. Because this was a couple levels in by the time this started happening. And I think I actually played this character in like a couple games. A couple different campaigns. Not just the one, but I had a couple of different campaigns at the time. So I was trying the same build in multiple games. So forgive me if I confuse the events a little bit. Because this was a very long time ago and I was playing it in like 3 games at the same time. Variations of the character. There were some minor stat differences, but I think that's about it. And all 3 GMs were very gracious enough to allow the whole holy symbol of Ilmater as a red string. So, but it very quickly became clear that the auras were going to be problematic because they negated. Like I had one group had a barbarian. Calm emotions negates the barbarian's rage. It stops the rage. A barbarian cannot go into rage with that aura unless they've already saved against it. They do get a save against it, but the problem is that the save is will save. Save is a will save, which is basically what equals a wisdom save in 5th edition, but it's a will save. Barbarians aren't noted for having a high will save. Plus, it's boosted by the vow of nonviolence effect. So it's actually a pretty difficult save for a barbarian to make. So in order for a barbarian to rage, they have to either A, stay out of your aura of calm emotions, or, and this is exploiting it a bit, you can keep entering the aura over and over again until you make the save. So if you want to have emotions, you can just walk into that aura again and again until you make the save, and then you kind of stick around in the aura, and then you can rage at will while you're in there. It's a little bit metagamey, and I just have this vision of this peaceful healer just standing there, so serene, so quiet, and the barbarian just stepping close and then stepping away, and stepping close and stepping away, going, "Can I get angry? No, okay. Can I get angry? No, okay. Can I get angry? Yes, okay, I'm going to stick right here until we get into combat." But yeah, so the Barbarian's Rage, unusable. Same party I had that in had a Bard. A lot of Bard abilities are morale-based. I don't know 100% of them, but I know a lot of Bard abilities and spells, all morale-based. None of them work in that aura. So, yeah, it was problematic because that one aura, as fun as it was to roleplay, and it did very, very well in the social one. I mean, we had all kinds of opportunities because we'd be in the middle of a town and like somebody would draw a weapon or something. And we avoided quite a bit of fights in that game because of that aura. And because of that aura and the high diplomacy this particular character ended up having, because a lot of these give bonuses to diplomacy, I decided to make it a diplomacy high-end character. because of that high combination of high diplomacy and calming aura, we got a lot of information. We actually had not just prisoners, but people who had like full on conversion or redemptions, and were like, oh, I am so sorry for trying to harm you. I will help you out. In that social based campaign, that ended up being very good. Although I know one of the fighters was getting very irritated because every time we'd fight, we'd get like 2 rounds in, and then people would start surrendering and being like, oh, we didn't mean to hurt you. But okay, so that kind of build worked real well in that group. But always kind of check what kind of character you want to make, because in the other group with the Bard and the Barbarian, it became very clear that the group was not going to be able to operate with my character. And in that one, I did eventually end up retiring the character and had to make another healer, because it was to the point where we could not engage in combat without my character being very far away, and that is extremely problematic if your healer cannot approach. What's the distance on that aura? Give me a moment. The aura's distance is only 20 feet. So it's not that far. But you're at least 20 feet away. You're at least 20 feet away. So if your healer, if you've got like a full round casting time, anything, that's not going to happen. You have to keep a clear line. If there's any sort of difficult terrain, that healer's not going to get there in 1 round. So it's one of those things that you really have to consider. I think I ended up taking things like Stigmata on her, and it just ended up being basically this very saint-like healer, complete pacifist, always looking for the non-violent way out. And I had a lot of fun with it. But I can understand the group that basically made me retire, because that in that case it just was not going to work out. Some builds work better with some groups. I would recommend a build like that for a social group, for instance. The social group did very well, as I said. Some builds just don't work in other groups. Now, if it had been a different, even in the high combat game, the hack and slash game, still would have been a viable build if it had been a different group makeup. If it had been, for instance, fighters and rogues rather than bards, rather than the bard and the barbarian. If there'd been maybe some sort of, that's just the problem. There was a bunch of morale and emotion-based stuff going to be not so useful with a pacifist healer sort. I would like to play that healer again someday, although my interest in playing 3.x is almost nil. And I don't really think you can do that in 5th edition. Actually, I think you might be able to. One moment. Yeah, I don't think you can to the full extent that you could in 3rd edition. However, there are the beginnings of something similar to that. And that is, in Xanathar's Guide, there is a paladin build, and it is called the Oath of Redemption. And this does give you like the Sanctuary spell and other... The Oath of Redemption paladin uses violence, but it uses violence as a last resort. And they do have auras that let you punish people for being violent, let you protect your allies. So not the same sort of thing, not the same sort of... It's like thematically similar, but mechanically very different. It's an interesting character types. One They used to be called there's the PRC in the same Book of Exalted Deeds that I pulled all those feats from, called the Apostle of Peace. These pacifist type characters, I think they're quite interesting in terms of opening up the game to nonviolent resolutions, even if the particular adventure is designed for hack and slash. Some adventures are designed for nonviolent resolutions from the top down. They are very socially heavy adventures, but a character with like a peaceful aura who is actually able to enforce their will and make people stop attacking, that does have the potential to kind of even out an ordinary, very combat-focused game and potentially add a degree of role-playing to it regarding things like redemption and basically keeping, making villains, if not allies, then at least making villains less villainous. And your DM really has to be willing to go with that. And that is the main problem I had when trying to play this type of character. It was hard to find a DM that was willing to go that route. And part of it is because of, there's this thing where people don't like playing with like genuinely good aligned characters for some reason. I don't know. But there's also a tendency, I admit, on some people that play those kinds of characters to play them a little bit preachier than the game really calls for. So I understand a DM that does not want to deal with that. I also understand a DM that just doesn't want to put in the effort for more than, seeing how many orc skulls a dwarf can cleave into in one encounter. I've got several games that have done just that. Nothing wrong with a hack and slash game. But a peace aura type character, a pacifist type character, one that has genuine mechanics behind it in order to assist with things. Even if they're very vague mechanics, even if it's just so long as there's some, there's a difference between a pacifist character walking up to a raging dragon and trying to talk them down, and a pacifist character that goes up to a raging dragon and has reason to believe that they can talk them down because of some either mechanic or some sort of granted power. One, the intent might be nice, but they do end up looking like a jackass sometimes because you go up to like a random group of thugs that's looking to kill you right now, and you try to talk them down. A lot of times it's not going to work, but if you've got some sort of supernatural ability to, if not force them, at least to give them pause long enough for you to actually talk, I don't know. It seems like you look like less of a jackass when you're doing that. There's a reason why why the people that have no supernatural backing end up becoming martyrs in that instance. They end up walking up, trying the peaceful resolution, and being the first ones in the line of fire. But I would like to. I don't necessarily want to see something like the Book of Exalted Deeds for 5th edition, because there's a lot of broken stuff in this. There's a lot of broken stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in this one too. I don't know how available this is. I know the PDF's available. I might put links to it in the description below if I remember. And I don't necessarily think that the route that this book went would be best for 5th edition. But it is a good book. And I would like to see something for 5th edition in that regard. And they've started, as I said, the Oath of Redemption or whatever it is. I closed the book. I'm sorry, I'm not going to look it up again. And there are some third-party things out there, but I think they're all hyped on this 3 pillars of gameplay kind of thing, and it's basically formalizing what everybody always knew to D&D to be. I think that would benefit. That would benefit that approach. Anyway, I am done rambling on that. I could do entire videos on nothing but the contents of these kinds of books. In fact, I might. Except if I do, I'm going to start with one of my favorite books, and that's from 2nd edition. And we will get to that in a future. In fact, I'm going to do it. We will get to that in a future video. Until then, this has been the RPG Crawler with an RPG Storytime. Thank you for listening to me ramble for a little bit. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye.